So it's a fantastic day outside to start making my Ssangsudo Mokgum. Now Mokgum is a Korean version of a wooden training sword. Here's an example of a normal length Mokgum. But a Ssangsudo Mokgum is just a little bit longer than that. It should be around about 6 feet, so about my height. Now I've already traced out on here the general shape of the Mokgum, and I've used a template to find the arc so I can actually get the correct shape as we go. But I have a couple of challenges. One, it's very long. Two, my woodwork skills aren't great. And three, it's actually wider than it needs to be by about 1/2 mil. So if you have a look, you can see, might be able to see here, the Mokgum handle. It's about 1/2 mil. So I'm going to have to sand it back quite considerably. And I'm just using pine wood here. Try to find one without too many knots, and you'll see how that goes. Yeah, so a couple of distinctive things on the blade I'm looking for. The back of the blade has this sharper angle, slight flat edge to the top, whereas actually the bladed edge is actually round. It's got a noticeable dint here to denote the start of the blade or the end of the handle. And when it comes to Ssangsudo Mokgums, they're actually quite a bit longer. So the actual handle is going to end around about here. So most of the bottom of this is actually handle. And just to give you an idea, here's a Kagum, so it's a metal training sword. And if you imagine this is 6 feet long, what they had is a brass plate which sits on the bottom half of the blade. So you can actually hold the blade as part of the sword work, because you need more distance between your hands. So for this one, distance is perfect on that handle, but the longer the blade, the longer the handle. You can still hold it back just on the handle itself, but generally what you're looking for is a much longer handle. So that's that extra brass piece, which I'm going to build into the design. So next stage, I've got to jigsaw this out to that nice sort of shape. So let's see how we go. So I've completed that first edge. That's the bladed edge. So hopefully I'll be able to round that and sand that down, make it a little bit nicer. Now, time to take off the back edge. So back to the old jigsaw. Now I don't want to start too close to the edge here because this is right at the point of the sword. So I'm going to start a couple of inches in. What would be a very nice spear. So, part one's complete, and I now have the general shape of my extra long blade. A lot of sanding going to have to happen. As you can see, it's quite thick up here than I need it to be, but you can actually start to see where the shape would be now for this blade. The weight, obviously I've cut off about half the wood. I mean, especially before it was up to here. I cut the top off before we started, but the weight is probably halved, if not more, at this stage. And I was a bit worried that it would be a little bit of a heavy blade. Mokgums are normally a little bit, well, they're not made to be super light, but I was worried that it would be too heavy. So hopefully now, with a bit of sanding, which is the hard part, I'll have a Ssangsudo Mokgum. So, let's see how we go. Part 2. So here I am with day 2, and today I'm going to be getting the belt sander out and hopefully getting a little bit more shape to this sword. I'm going to start here with the handle and just try and sand it back to the measurements I want, and then I can start working on the curve. So, here we go. Oh, it's going to take a bit longer than that. So the weather's turned a bit here, so volume-wise it's probably not great to hear me, but guess what we'll do. I'm not aiming to get millions of views on a YouTube hit about making a long Korean style sword. But I've done the front bladed edge. So now we've got that definite curve going on. I gave myself a little bit of sanding on the corners here so I could grip it and play with it a little bit now. Actually that's come out quite well. So the hardest part comes up next. The next component is actually taking off about half a mil down the entire side of sanding. That's going to take a little while. The idea is that I just need it to be just a little bit thinner. It's just a little bit too fat to grip nicely, even if I sanded it back. So if I can take just a little bit of edge off one side, then that's going to actually make it just that little bit easier to grip. And then curving the blade and sanding the spine. So hopefully we should be getting close. So welcome back. Back at it again. Weather's cleared up a little bit, so it's a little bit nicer. Got myself some safety goggles now, so that's been a good eventuality. So where are we up to? I have done a little bit of stuff not on camera. So what I've done is, I was really lucky my tape measure had a little hole in the right spot, and I was able to actually shave or do a line down here for that half a mil off I needed to take off in width. I started doing the sand on it, and it was just taking a little bit too long. So I cheated, got the jigsaw out, sort of ground down a little bit of extra millimeters off the edge here. It's pretty rough, like you can see there's wavy bits here, so I'm going to have to grind it down and sand it down pretty well. But it does feel better in the grip. So what I've done is I've got another little bit of wood here, and I'm going to clamp it to that. Oh, before I go on, if you just do decide to copy me and do this yourself, before you carve out the curved shape of the sword, what I realized I should have done is done this edge. Because what I found was, because it was such a fine edge, I needed to clamp it down that way. So it was fine when I was on the what becomes the bladed edge, because that one sits flat. But as soon as I get on this inside of the arc here, it's really hard to clamp it properly. So in hindsight, when it was nice and straight as a fresh piece of timber, that's probably the best time to actually shave it this way. If you can't get hold of a device called a thickener. Now I tried, joinery places have them, but there was nowhere who would actually just throw one piece of wood through me, through their thickener for me. But to make it thin, you use a thickener, go figure. But that would have been ideal, it would have just been perfect, the absolute correct width. But need to do it as here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start shaving it down, or sanding it down I should say, a little bit here. So I've got my clamps again to hold it into place. Because it's always good when things don't move. Now you may have noticed, I'm not going to take it off again, but I put sort of a point on the end of the sword now. Sort of ground that down a little bit to be a little bit more shaped. And I use the jigsaw for that, just for a bit of speed. All right, time to go sanding again. Away we go. Well, I started on the blade edge of things, and it's, I think it's looking pretty awesome. So you can sort of see now it has that curve, or you might be able to see, I don't know, I can see that curve for the blade. Always strange with Mokgums that the curved side is the blade side and you have a much straighter spine. So that's actually looking pretty epic. I'm pretty happy with how that's turned out. Now the next thing I need to do is the handle. The handle has to also be rounded out, but I wanted to make sure that I have these sort of specific edges. So one of the next things I need to do is do the spine of the blade, and I've got a mark here for halfway what I'm going to do here, and then round out the handle, and then it's just into fine sanding time, which will take a little while. It's a bit rough and material-like at the moment, this bit of timber, but I am using quite a chunky grit of sandpaper. So, the handle or the spine, what to do next? I think I'm going to do the handle because then at least I can play with it before I run out of time. It's starting to get a little bit darker now, so let's get this handle sorted. Clamps a go-go. It's hard to clamp it in place, to be honest with you, because of that curve now. The more curved the blade gets, the harder it is to sort of secure. But the good thing about this is that clamp it down, screw it down, it'll get there. All right, handle time. Yes, handle, because then I can play. Now I don't want to take too much off. You can see I've got a notch off here. So I just want to sort of smooth out those edges a little bit and round them off, much like I have the front of the blade. Okay, moment of truth. This is kind of when I say, can I make my own Mokgum or not? And, oh, that handle feels good. That's good. Haha, I like it. Yes. All right, I'm actually quite happy with that. Really, the only thing left to get the basic shape down now is the spine. So, I'm going to push on, see if I can get that done before it gets dark. Check it out. Sword is nearly ready. Fine sanding. I got the shape, got the width, so much lighter. Yay. So, here we are, next stage. Getting close to the business end and clean up time. Just an update to where we are. So I've actually got the blade now looking pretty much where I want it to be. So I've got the curved edge for the blade, I've got the spine there, handle's looking quite nice and it's comfortable to hold. It's a little bit straight line in some bits, but we'll curve that off soon enough. But overall, it's actually looking pretty good. So now I'm up to the next bit of sanding stage. So this is the bit which is probably going to take the longest out of everything. Whoopsie daisy. And that's just the hand sanding bit. So I've just got some sandpaper and I'm just going to start hitting it by hand. And I thought maybe this way might be good. So apart from everywhere being covered in sawdust, I've actually sanded this down to a point which I'm quite happy with. I mean, there's a little gouge out here in the bottom of the blade. I can't really do anything. It's just the grain of the wood, unfortunately, has opened up in that spot. But generally, it's come to a very nice, smooth finish. So I've used 120 grit, 180 grit. I'm now about to use, in essence, 240 grit. But I found these little pads at Bunnings and they are foam, so they curve. So you can actually sand by wrapping your fingers around the end, and this is just going to give it that nice fine finish. It's pretty much there in terms of the polish. I just need to get it just that little bit shinier, just because I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So, there you go. And here we go, the Ssangsudo Mokgum is complete. I have sanded it down nice and fine. Is it perfect? No, but you know what? I'm pretty happy with the end result. What I'll find, I guess, is a little few imperfections, and I'm going to probably use it for a little while and see how I go. And then I'm going to seal it. Maybe stain it, I'm not sure. Kind of like that light pine look, so I might leave it as pine, might stain it, but I'll definitely varnish it of some sort, or varnish, I think, over lacquer or something to protect the wood and stop it from and seal up the pores. I also have a decision to make about whether I'm going to etch anything down into the handle. So I'm thinking maybe Hayden Gundo or my Zone Martial Arts logo or something like that. We'll see. But you know, overall, it's super comfortable and super happy with the end result. I honestly thought it might be a little heavy. When I first got the timber, it was fairly wide. At the start of the video, you will remember. It's fairly wide, it was thicker, and what you wouldn't have seen in the video is actually I cut it short. The actual piece of timber initially was right up here, so I cut about a foot and a half off before I started the video. So when I first picked up this bit of timber, super heavy. But you know, by taking off that foot and a half at the top, that's a fair big chunk of weight. By taking off, in essence, nearly a quarter of the thickness here, that's taken off a whole bunch of weight. Shaping it to the sword shape, you know, you get the idea, it's taken off a lot of weight. And actually it means that it's actually quite balanced. And even before I started to sand and shape it, I was holding it like this and thinking, oh, I'm so glad I have the extra part of the grip which you get on these long swords, because that'll help the control. But I can actually hold it back here and have a fair amount of control. Now a normal sword handle probably only goes to about here anyway, so that's kind of your normal grip. So you can sort of see there, but the handle on this one is longer, the extra grip is longer, and the blade, well, it's nice and long as well. So, time for me to go have a little bit of a play, and maybe for you to head off to the hardware store and see if you want to try it yourself. Thanks everyone.